Hello, I am Mark Tucker,
And I am Alan Furstenberg, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Well, we're kind of doing this intro at the end, aren't we, Alan?
Yeah, I guess we are. So to explain to people, Mark and I just had a really good conversation that fortunately we recorded, and then decided to turn into an episode. So we needed to record the opening, and I don't know, do you want to say anything about it before we rewind and go back to the beginning, Mark?
Well, just to set you up, we're going to be talking about a potential open source project called PostAPL. So you can process APL documents with JavaScript plugins, or even a pipeline of JavaScript plugins. So this is just kind of our, my idea, my exploration, and just kind of our, chat about that experience.
Very good. So let's rewind and take it from the beginning.
Sure.
So start over. Tell me about what the rough idea behind this was.
Okay, so if you've worked in web development and done CSS, there are a number of things called preprocessors. Was it SCSS?
SCSS, SCC?
Yeah,
whatever.
stylus. There's a number of different ones that you can, and you can add some special tags and stuff to your CSS and then run it through this processor and it spits out CSS.
Right.
Well, there's a project called PostCSS, which is kind of a misnomer because it's not necessarily always happened after. It's just a processor, and I don't know, post is shorter than process. I'm not sure exactly why they called it PostCSS, but the idea is that you would run a particular document. It could be CSS, or it could be something that is marked up with certain tags or something. And it would run it through a pipeline of plugins, and each plugin is a JavaScript code where you could then walk through the CSS. Well, it takes the CSS, turns it into an abstract syntax tree, and then you could manipulate the abstract syntax tree, changing values, adding items, doing stuff. And then the output would be CSS or like probably CSS,
Right.
Most likely.
Quickly looking at the page, I can kind of get what the point of some of this is, so it lets you do things like, currently there's a lot of browser specific attributes. So yes, because they haven't been fully standardized yet. So sometimes you need to, so it would make sense if you just create the one standard version or semi-standard version, and then have this generator automatically generate all of the variants of it. Okay, this makes sense. Or yeah.
So it's transforming CSS with JavaScript plugins, a pipeline of JavaScript plugins.
Okay, this makes sense.
So last week I just had this idea that I just really couldn't get out of my head until I coded enough of it to kind of prove out the concept and see if it would work. And it did. In my little proof of concept, I was able to do the same thing, but my idea was to have PostAPL. So you could have a pipeline of plugins that would transform APL from in one state to another. And you could do a number of different things in there that would be clever. Like when you create a component, actually APL is very forgiving as long as it's inside of the main template or inside of the layout section. And as long as it has a parameter called type, you can put whatever you want to, which means you could then put placeholders in your APL and then run it through a pipeline and have one or more JavaScript plugins look for those tags and then replace them with certain things. Or
now, I guess the first thing that would come to mind about this is, well, how much do you need that? Because the reason why you need it in CSS is because CSS is not a templating language. So all of the other things in PostCSS all essentially add templating to, or amongst their other features can add templating to it. But APL is a templating language.
So it is a templating language. It's just, I think, or at least the idea behind that I wanted to explore was, well, there may be things that you want to make an API call for, or standardize in some sort of a file, and then process all of your APL files the same. So for example, when
Okay.
you open up a document, there is a background color that shows on the screen before the document loads. And there's certain parameters or certain things that you set. You could have a plugin that has a configuration that says, this is how I'm defining that. You don't have to actually define it in any of your APL that you've got in your project, but then you run it through the pipeline. And when it hits that point, it's going to go ahead and make sure all of those are standard.
So how much of this could eliminate boilerplate, for example? Because, if that's a sort of thing, if you need to set font size, for example,
yep,
in a bunch of different templates, maybe this means that you don't need to specify it at all. You just specify it as one of the plugin rules. And as it generates it, from all of the source ones, it's now automatically inserting some of these defaults.
Yeah, and I think there are some things like that could be smart. Like you could have defined like a certain number of like resources. The mechanism in APL for defining something that's reused multiple times throughout with a certain value could be like, oh, this color is going to be used all throughout the system, or this size, this margin width or something like that. You can use, define that once as a resource and then use that all through the process. So you could then, use that to define, oh, I've got like a theme and it's going to be a red theme, and maybe it generates 5 different color resources that are named a standard way based on what color you choose for your theme. And then all you have to do is use these resources throughout. And when you run it through the processor, your config value is, I want it to be red, or I want it to be blue, or I want, or my primary color, secondary color, or, things like that.
I guess the question though is, you could also include those resources
in the document itself. You could.
In the data itself.
That is true as well. So there are some options. Like here's another example that might sell it a little bit more. Like maybe I can go through and process this document and find out every property that accepts a color. Maybe there is like the word red or the hex number, and maybe red is hard-coded in multiple places. Maybe you could have a plugin that would go through and evaluate all those. And if it wasn't a data binding expression or a function, well, because there was like RGB functions, but that might even work. You could then say, I want to check to see if there's a resource that's named that. If not, create a resource, color 1, color 2, whatever it is, and then
default it to this value. Yeah.
And then throughout, then just start replacing it and start moving your code. And then you've got like a pass through where you clean up all your code, and it just creates the resources for you based on these different rules.
So I guess I could see merit to this.
Yeah. So there's some different ways. I don't necessarily have a super strong use case, but the idea of being able to process APL was something that was interesting. And so I spent some time like last Friday night. I worked on it and got it to a point where I thought it was working, and I was kind of using some of the syntax or code from PostCSS about how they structured their process function and how they did plugins. And I had a couple of sample plugins written, and I didn't really at the time didn't feel like I needed to change the JSON into an abstract syntax tree, because you could just manipulate the JSON. But what I did, which was fun, was being able to go through and you could then specify JSON by saying, property dot 0. So like if that previous property was an array, then it would be like index 0 dot property. And then you could like find nodes that based on those paths and manipulate them or add things in.
Did you ever use XPath with XML?
I sure did.
I had similar issues when I started doing the same sort of thing on JavaScript objects for multivocal. Is I had this notion of a path, and I wanted to be able to specify things like Um, this path being the obvious one, but also the last element in this path, or add on to this element in this path, to the array that's
Yeah.
there. So I had similar issues, let's say.
So anyways, I thought, okay, like Friday night, I'm like, okay, I got to a point on Saturday. Then I'll be able to just kind of package it up a little bit and be able to send it out. But then the more I kind of tested it, I'm like, well, I don't know that I'm happy that it's a JSON object. And there was some stuff I was doing. I was using actually a library instead of just the standard, loading up of JSON, because at least in APL Ninja, you can have comments in it. I'm not sure. I haven't actually really tested in the actual library, API stuff that Alexa gives as far as returning back a directive, if the APL can have comments in it or not.
That's an interesting one. Yeah,
but I used like
standard
JSON-C.
Because standard JSON does not allow comments. In fact, it very explicitly
does
not allow comments.
Yeah, but so then I looked at this like JSON-C parser, and that would allow me to actually parse the comments. And then I found another one which was actually a JSON to abstract syntax tree library, which I'm like, that's kind of cool, because then I would actually get these different objects. And so then, I kind of went down the rabbit hole there, and I'm like, well, I could find it in a path off the abstract syntax tree, but I would have to change some things. But I could also then use this approach where the plugin could use a visitor pattern and, go through.
I almost hate to suggest this one to you, because it might totally derail you, or it might.
I've already been derailed like 2 or 3 times on my approach on this.
You've heard of the JQ command, right?
Yes, I have, and I've used things like JSONata.
JSONata, I've never heard of.
And there are different ways that you can access like JSON schema. There's a number of things, and that's also that's something else that, like, if Amazon were to release a JSON schema for
an actual schema,
each of the versions of the different documents, because they have layouts, they have styles, and they have viewport something or other. If they were to, and for each of the versions had a schema file, you could then check to see if the document supports that schema, because there's a part in your APL document that you have to specify, well, what is the version that this supports? Well, you could, if you had some of this extra information, have a plugin that would go through and say, set that property to the least required version of APL.
Well, I mean, the other thing that you could do is, if you have a version, if you've got something that you've built for 1.8, you could have a plugin that downgrades it to 1.7.
Exactly.
And, this way, feed the right version to whatever can support it.
Yeah.
It means you're downgraded. But what I was thinking with JQ was that it has a lot of these rewrite rules as part of it already. Okay. And it has that path notation already defined. So, and it's open source. So it may be worth looking into to see if you can build everything you want to build on top of JQ as a series of JQ scripts.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Because I'm still kind of going back and forth. Is the source of the thing that you're manipulating actually the JSON document, or is it going to be an abstract syntax tree? So I could potentially add comments as well, or even like read comments and say this. I could use comments as directives, directives inside of my thing, or hints.
Yeah,
that would okay. So if you're using this plugin, then go through and in your document add comments, which was explicitly the reason why they did not want to have comments in JSON. It's exciting, and after a while, I started thinking about it. I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's a post JSON, because I'm like, and there was a project that was created like 6 or 7 years ago, but then it hasn't been touched in years, and it didn't look like it had the plugin capability in it, which was kind of what I was using for that functionality. And instead of just being JSON specific, I was definitely thinking that would be APL specific, because you could check a certain node and say, is it a style, or is it a,
Well, right.
um,
I
is
I
it a
think
resource? And there's some, specific like candy that you could add that would make it easy to know how to navigate an APL document.
right. I think certainly, see, now I have it stuck in my head to build it on top of JQ. But I think if you did, or if you stole large chunks of JQ to build it, that you would be defining shortcuts
Yes.
to navigate portions of it, because they're the common portions you need to navigate. Or you need a way to load what version you're targeting, what version it says it's set to.
Yeah.
And just have that stored as a variable somewhere, because you're always going to need that, or you're always going to need various other things.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I originally had written it so it would actually go against the tree. And what it would do is it would go to the first node, and then it would say, okay, plugins 1 through X, check to see, and it would have like a can process and a process, and so it would check to see if the plugin even cared about that particular node, and that worked fine. But then that was kind of the thing that I went down multiple rabbit holes on Saturday doing, was that I realized that PostCSS does one plugin traverses the whole document, the second plugin traverses. So there isn't really necessarily a need for the plugin itself to say, can I support this or not? It's just you're in the plugin, and then you can either grab something by path. And then the problem was, well, how do I navigate an abstract syntax tree by path when it's the JSON? That would be something I have to add in. But then I did like the idea of having the visitor pattern as another option, where you can say, instead of like, I just want to go to the specific path and change this thing, it's like, I want to process all literal nodes, but I would like, well, what if I wanted to change that and say, I wanted to process all resource nodes? And so then, add some additional things to that. And so that took, a huge part of the day. And in the end, I realized I hadn't got to some sort of resolution yet. And so the idea is still kind of nagging in the back of my head. I'm not sure when I'll readdress it.
Not like our design decision quickly about how we were going to change speech markdown to support this.
Well, and that's part of my problem is that I have all these ideas, and some of them, a number of them I release as open source software, and then they have varying degrees of usage, and then I have to keep maintaining them, plus all the other things that I had really, or at least I thought I had good ideas about, right?
I hear you there on multivocal.
I'll match your speech markdown and raise you a multivocal. Is that what you're doing?
No, I don't think it's a raise you. It's more of I've got all these ideas, and every so often someone will ask, so where's the Alexa version of multivocal anyway? And I'll go,
I'm not sure who would do that.
Yeah. No, this sounds very cool though, but I definitely understand the another open source project to maintain.
Yeah. So I still am excited about it. I still think it has potential. But I'll just have to kind of see when I do revisit it. And so, okay, this is full disclosure. So the Bunny APL project that I created on Saturday night was because I wanted to create something that I actually got accomplished over the weekend.
I totally hear you on that one.
And then of course I couldn't just say, oh, here, set the value with the emoji for what the bunny's holding. I had to try to figure out some sort of expanding sidebar panel thing, which was, I'm just like, that added a couple of hours to it. Plus I had to get help from Alexander Martin because I got a lot better idea on how to do it than I did.
I saw Dana Gibson looks like he's working on actually turning that into a skill and publishing the code behind that skill.
Oh, that would be awesome. Do it, Dana.
So
that would be cool.
Maybe by the time this airs, he'll have published that already.
Yeah, and then it has all kinds of. You can have another panel where you could say, instead of that bunny, ASCII, image, you could have various other ones, and
right. But but also, when you select what it's holding, it tells you what it's holding,
Yep.
and you can issue voice commands to change colors, and so it's
Yep.
this
Change
showing
bunny color to red, change
right
background color to blue.
showing what the how everything works together.
Yeah, and what's kind of fascinating is that that has zero backend code. That is all APL manipulation, data binding, and commands. Just kind of fun APL thing. So yeah, so I ended up doing that because I felt like I needed to get something accomplished. I can say I started something and finished something this week.
I totally get that.
Hey, so Alan.
Yes, Mark.
So last week we were talking about this idea that I had that I've been kind of mulling over, and I tried working on it. And it's just kind of, and so after we talked, then I actually had some good progress made. So I was just, that happens, I think, a lot of times when we're developing something, that something just kind of sits in the back of our mind. Yeah, it just kind of sets, and you start thinking about it, and you're like, hey, I wonder if I tried it this. And it's one of those things where I tried an approach, it didn't quite work exactly how I wanted it to. And then I thought about trying it a different way last weekend, and I started making progress, and I started making more progress, to the point that now the idea is a reality. It is called PostAPL, and it's open source. It's out on GitHub, on its own organization, its own repo. Just look for PostAPL, and you'll find not only the PostAPL project itself, but
the core project.
The core project, the project that has the function that is the processor that accepts plugins that you will feed input in as an APL document, and then be able to write out the resulting APL document after it runs through each of those different plugins that you've configured. So that's the PostAPL project. There are 2 sample plugins, plus there's a boilerplate plugin project. So if you were to go to the boilerplate project, you can actually run a little wizard. It will ask you some questions in the command line, let you give it a name. There's even a place where you can do arrow keys up to a point where you can edit the text that's there. And when that happens, then you will have a starter project with the references that you need, with the sample documentation that you can fill in the blanks on. So all of this stuff, great stuff that I was able to repurpose over from the PostCSS project, and so it's out there.
Fantastic! That's awesome.
Yeah. So and the couple different plugins that we have. There's a plugin that's uses Mermaid, which is a charting or graphing library for JavaScript.
Okay. I saw you posting about wondering if people would be interested in seeing what a chart of their APL documents would look like, and I'm like, where's this coming from?
So that was one of the ideas. So when I had the idea, I started thinking about, well, what were some of the plugins? And I wanted to have a couple of plugins out there to show people how easy it is to create a plugin. So it goes through and identifies every object node that's a component under main templates in your APL document, and it does a tree. So like this container has 2 children, one's a container, the other one's a frame. That frame has a text. You can and it'll go ahead and print out the data file that you can then go to mermaid.live, paste it in, and you can see a chart. I also was interested and curious on as far as the abstract syntax tree that gets because when you
that's one of the things I was going to ask is so in doing this, you went the AST route. Yes, I did, because we had talked about a couple of different possible approaches.
Yeah, so the library they already have is like JSON to AST, so it already creates an abstract syntax tree from a JSON document, and so there is an object that gets passed into every plugin called result, and it has a property called root, which is that abstract syntax tree. So plugin 1 could manipulate that tree. Then when it gets passed out to plugin 2, then it's the manipulated tree, and it just keeps going through. You can build and manipulate and do whatever you want. And at the end, then that tree gets transformed back into JSON APL, and you're good to go. So this one doesn't. This mermaid chart is what I call a reporter. It doesn't really do any transformations at all, but you can actually spit out a chart of the components inside of your APL document, as well as the abstract syntax tree. If you're kind of trying to understand, well, what is
this doing? What
does this look like? How do I use this? If you're creating a plugin and aren't quite sure what all the objects are, you can look at that on a specific project. And so
very cool. So a couple of other questions. So one of the things you were debating at the time was whether the JSON would allow comments and whether those comments would have any directives attached to it. What route did you go on that front?
So I found out that with this library that I've used to convert the JSON to AST, it does accept comments. And you can have a comment at what they define as the document level. So when you have a JSON object, the root of it could either be an object or an array. So what this library does when it creates an abstract syntax tree, it creates a document node that is the parent, and then that could have a single child, which is either an array or an object. So you start off at that document object. So there can be comments associated at the document level, at the object level, and at the array level, but it doesn't look like it's necessarily associated with any like specific property on an object. So there might be some challenges to using it. And I haven't tried. If there's some like directives that you wanted to give at the object level or at the array level, then you could probably do that. But yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to play out.
So it's an open source project now. You've got a couple of example plugins. What are you hoping people will contribute? I mean, that's the great thing about open source is getting others to dive in and buy into your vision. What kinds of stuff are you looking for? Either looking for help on or hoping that the community just does because you feel the community needs it.
Yeah. So hopefully the APL, the PostAPL library itself is at a state that it's usable enough as is. Not necessarily looking for enhancements to that, but I am open to people creating issues or extending the functionality of that. Mostly looking for people to create plugins. You could create plugins if you're doing something on your own and just have it private to your own project because it's something that's going to run during your pipeline as part of processing your APL documents. But I'm really hoping that people will take those. It doesn't take that much extra effort to publish it and just make it available, for everybody. You can do that on your own GitHub repo if you want, and just there's actually a process to go through and add that to the official list of plugins that are on the PostAPL repo. Or if for some reason you just want to contribute the code and don't necessarily want it on your own GitHub, you could contribute to the PostAPL and just making an official PostAPL plugin as well. So that's something else. Looking for just using it, feedback, looking for a logo. If somebody wants to design a logo, so you don't get the default GitHub logo, then that would be something that would be helpful too.
How about documentation?
Yeah, there is quite a bit of documentation already. So reviewing the documentation, making edits to that, or if there's something that's not quite clear, that's something that definitely can contribute to as well.
Well, great. I look forward to seeing what the community does with this tool and what great things come out of it. And I'm sure we'll be talking about this some more in the future on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Mark. Have a good week.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.